let's continue to get reaction on the decision of the High Court in Pretoria, which has ruled that placing former President Jacob Zuma on medical parole by the former Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser was unlawful. Let's speak now to Afriforum's Ernst, who joins us from Pretoria. Mr. Roets, thank you very much for your time. You were the ones who took this particular matter to court. Your reaction on the outcome of this particular court case?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, Afriforum became involved with this matter, and we do regard this ruling as a major breakthrough for justice in South Africa. And we have been concerned, and the public has been concerned for some time now, that there seems to be apparent double standards in the legal system. In other words, that senior politicians and people with political connections are not treated the same way as the rest of us, which is what our experience was, or our perception was, at least with regard to this matter. And this ruling now has reversed that. So we regard this as a major breakthrough.
Was that the core of your argument in court, that politicians in South Africa are treated better, it would seem, by those who break the law than citizens of the country?
It's part of the argument, but the core of our legal argument was a legal argument. It was about the procedures that have to be followed with regard to getting medical parole, and the fact that we believe that what happened here was that the necessary steps were not followed, the necessary procedures were not taken. And in fact, what has been ruled now by the court, we were arguing that the decision to grant medical parole was unlawful because it did not comply with the requirements to grant medical parole.
Was there a particular argument from your side as to whether there should be any particular action that ought to be taken against the then Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser? Because we know immediately after that decision, when he explained himself days later, that he actually sidestepped the recommendations of the Medical Parole Board, which was of the view that there was no reason that the former president should be taken out of jail. He was not terminally ill. It may not have been the phrasing at the time. It may not have been the framing. However, he did overrule a decision of a collective team of medical experts. Yes,
exactly. And that's exactly why we felt it necessary to become involved, because it's quite clear that what happened in this case is that a certain outcome was orchestrated, or you could say manipulated in this matter, because the person in question is Jacob Zuma, regardless of what the law actually said. But our argument in this matter was particularly focused on the decision to grant medical parole, and the fact that that decision should not have been granted, because Jacob Zuma does not comply, as I said. That, in other words, he's not, as far as we can determine, terminally ill. And even if he is ill, even if he is sick, that's not necessarily sufficient grounds for medical parole. You have to be so sick that the courts cannot care for you, or do not have medical the ability to take care after you. While we do know that if you are sick in court, it doesn't mean that you just get released immediately. You have to be very, very sick. So no, the focus was not so much on taking action against Arthur Fraser at this stage. It's something that we will consider moving forward. The main focus was getting a declaratory order that the decision was unlawful and that former President Jacob Zuma has to go back to prison.
Yeah, and on that very matter that you've just touched on, the court directing that the former president should be returned to prison, what are the practicalities around this? And perhaps this might be a way for you to also remind South Africans the length of the time that the former president had to be placed in custody for, or might we now be dealing with an academic exercise here?
No, I don't think this is an academic exercise. I actually, before the interview, I haven't been able to read the complete judgment. I'm about 3/4 through it before you called me. But what I can tell you is that the court order says that he has to, the decision was unlawful, that former President Jacob Zuma has to go back to complete his 15 months in prison, and at the time he spent outside of court, in other words, the time that he was out now on so-called medical parole, should not be counted as part of his imprisonment. So he sort of, basically his prison time paused, you could say, when he was released, and it will continue when he gets back to prison. I did not see something in the order in terms of how and when this should be done, but obviously, in other words, how and when he should be taken, should the police go to his house and collect him and send him to prison. But obviously that is something that we will follow up and monitor as Afriforum, because that's the core of what a civil rights organization should do.
Well, that's a very interesting comment there. I'm completely out of time. In fact, I'll get into trouble if you're not able to answer this in less than a minute.
Sure.
You were the main complainants here, and if the former president does not return to prison, are there any practical steps that you intend taking? Very, very
yes. Yes, there will certainly. Well, we will monitor it and we'll see how it plays out. But there are legal mechanisms that are at our disposal. So we will keep track of what's happening, and in consultation with our legal team, if he does not go back to prison as the court ordered, we will intervene.
Ernst Roets is a leader within the Afriforum organization. Thank you very much for your time.